Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vajjana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Vajjana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajakacharya Ashtotartha Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajakacharya Ashtotartha Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye Nachtapraisha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 On this 19th day of April 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in the 8th canto, and we're beginning a new chapter, chapter 7, entitled, Lord Shiva Saves the Universe by Drinking Poison. And we'll read the chapter summary first. The summary of the 7th chapter is as follows. As described in this chapter, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appearing in his incarnation as a tortoise, dove deep into the ocean to carry Mandara mountain on his back. At first, the churning of the ocean produced Kala Kuta poison. Everyone feared this poison, but Lord Shiva satisfied them by drinking it. With the understanding that when the nectar was generated from the churning, they would share it equally, the demigods and the demons brought Vasuki to be used as the rope for the churning rod. Vasuki is a big snake. By the expert arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the demons held the snake near the mouth, whereas the demigods held the tail of the great snake. Then, with great endeavor, they began pulling the snake in both directions. Because the churning rod, Mandara mountain, was very heavy and was not held by any support in the water, it sank into the ocean. And in this way, the prowess of both the demons and the demigods was vanquished. The Supreme Personality of Godhead then appeared in the form of a tortoise and supported Mandara mountain on his back. Then the churning resumed with great force. As a result of the churning, a huge amount of poison was produced. The Prajapatis, seeing no one else to save them, approached Lord Shiva and offered him prayers full of truth. Lord Shiva is called Ashutosh because he is very pleased if one is a devotee. Therefore, he easily agreed to drink all the poison generated by the churning. The goddess Durga, Bhavani, the wife of Lord Shiva, was not at all disturbed when Lord Shiva agreed to drink the poison, for she knew Lord Shiva's prowess. Indeed, she expressed her pleasure at this agreement. Then Lord Shiva gathered the devastating poison which was everywhere. He took it in his hand and drank it. After he drank the poison, his neck became bluish. A small quantity of the poison dropped from his hands to the ground. And it is because of this poison that there are poisonous snakes, scorpions, toxic plants, and other poisonous things in this world. That covers it. What more do we need? Okay. Text 1. Shri Shugo Vacha Te Nagarajam Amantya Palabhagena Vasukim Pariviya Gerautasmin Netramabdim Mudanvitaha Arebire Sodayatta Amitarte Kurudvaha Shri Shuka Uvacha Te Nagaraja Mamantya Palabhage Nabasukim Pariviya Girautasmin Netramam Dim Mudanvitaha Hare Bide Sudayata Amitate Kurudvaha Shri Shuka Vacha Te Nagaraja Mamantya Palabhage Nabasukim Padiviya Garautasmin Netramabdim Mudanvitaha Hare Bideswarayata Amitate Kurudvaha. Please chant. Shri Shugovacha Te Nagaraja Mamantya Palabhage Nabasukim Padiviya Garautasmin Netramabdim Mudanvitaha Hare Bideswarayata Amitate Kurudvaha. Abhiral. Shri Shugovacha Te Nagaraja Mamantya Palabhagena Vasukim Pariviyagarau Tasmin Netamam Drim Mudanvitaha Arebire Surayatta Amitate Kurudbaha. Ladies. Shri Shugovacha Te Nagaraja Mamancha Palabhagena Vasukim Padiviyagarau Tasmin Netamam Din Mudanvitaha Arebire Surayatta Amitate Kurudbaha. You want to try? Sri Shugovacha Te Nagaraja Mamantrya Palabhagena Vasukim Pariviyagarau Tasmin Netramam Din Mudanvitaha Harebire Surayatta Amitate Kurudbaha. Anyone online?
Shri Shukavacha
Shri Shugovacha
Te Nagarajam Amantrya
Te Nagarajam Amantrya
Palabhagena Vasukim
Palabhagena Vasukim
Ariviya Girau Tasmin
Pariviyagarau Tasmin
Netram Abdim Mudanvitaha
Netramam Mudanvitaha
Arebire Surayata
Arebire Surayatta
Amritarte Kuru Dvaha.
Amitate Kurudvaha. Anyone else?
Vacha
Shri Sugovacha
Tenagarajam Amantraya
Te Nagarajam Amantrya
Palobhagena Vashukim
Palabhagena Vasukim
Pariviya Girau Tasmin
Padiviyagarau Tasmin
Netram Abdim Mudanvita
Netramam Mudanvitaha
Are Vire Surajatta
Arebire Surayatta
Amritarte Kurutbaha.
Amitate Kurudbaha. Anyone else? Shri Shugovacha
Te Nagarajam Amantya
Te Nagarajam Amantrya
Palabhagena Vasukim
Palabhagena Vasukim
Priviyagarau Tasmin
Pariviyagarau Tasmin
Etram Abdhim Madhudvata
Netramam Mudanvitaha
Arabhire Surayatra
Arebire Surayatta
Mritarte Kurudvaha.
Amitate Kurudvaha. Shri Shugovacha Shri Shukadev Goswami said, Te, all of them, the demigods and the demons, Nagarajam, the king of the Nagas or snakes, Amantya, inviting or requesting, Palabhagena, by promising a share of the nectar, Vasukim, the snake Vasuki, Padiviya, encircling, Girau, under a mountain, Tasmin, unto it, Netram, the churning rope, Abdhim, the ocean of milk, Muda Anvitaha, all surcharged with great pleasure. Arebire, began to act. Suraha, the demigods. Yattaha, with great endeavor. Amrita arte, for gaining nectar. Kuru udvaha, O King Pariksit, best of the Kurus. Translation. Shukadev Goswami said, O best of the Kurus, Maharaj Pariksit, the demigods and demons summoned Vasuki, king of the serpents, requesting him to come and promising to give him a share of the nectar. They coiled Vasuki around Mandara mountain as a churning rope, and with great pleasure they endeavored to produce nectar by churning the ocean of milk. Text 2, I'll just chant myself. Hari Purastaj Jagrihe Purvam Devas Tato Bhavan. The personality of Godhead, Ajita, grasped the front portion of the snake, and then the demigods followed. Text 3. I'll skip the Sanskrit. The leaders of the demons thought it unwise to hold the tail, the inauspicious portion of the snake. Instead, they wanted to hold the front, which had been taken by the personality of Godhead and the demigods, because that portion was auspicious and glorious. Thus the demons, on the plea that they were all highly advanced students of Vedic knowledge and were all famous for their birth and activities, protested that they wanted to hold the front of the snake. Purport. The demons thought that the front of the snake was auspicious and that catching hold of that portion would be more chivalrous. Moreover, Daityas, demons, must always do the opposite of the demigods. That is their nature. We have actually seen this in relation to our Krishna consciousness movement. We are advocating cow protection and encouraging people to drink more milk and eat palatable preparations made of milk. But the demons, just to protest such proposals, are claiming that they are advanced in scientific knowledge, as described here by the words Svadhyaya Shrutasampanna. They say that according to their scientific way, they have discovered that milk is dangerous and that the beef obtained by killing cows is very nutritious. This difference of opinion will always continue. Indeed, it has existed since days of yore. Millions of years ago, there was the same competition. The demons, as a result of their so-called Vedic study, preferred to hold the side of the snake near the mouth. The Supreme Personality of Godhead thought it wise to catch hold of the dangerous part of the snake and allow the demons to hold the tail, which was not dangerous. But because of a competitive desire, the demons thought it wise to hold the snake near the mouth. If the demigods were going to drink poison, the demons would resolve, why should we not share the poison and die gloriously by drinking it? Okay, in regard to the words Svadhyaya Shrutasampanna Prakyata Janma Karmabhi. Now I don't know, those words are not in the verses we just read. Maybe they were the one I didn't read. Another question may be raised. If one is actually educated in Vedic knowledge, is famous for performing prescribed activities, and has been born in a great aristocratic family, why should he be called a demon? The answer is that one may be highly educated and may have been born in an aristocratic family, but if he is godless, if he does not listen to the instructions of God, then he is a demon. There are many examples in history of men like Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, and Kṛṣṇa, who were well educated, who were born in aristocratic families, and who were very powerful and chivalrous in fighting, but who, because of deriding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were called Rakshasas or demons. One may be very well educated, but if he has no sense of Krishna consciousness, no obedience to the Supreme Lord, he is a demon. That is described by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 7:15. Namam dushkritano mudha papadyante naradamahan mayaya purita jnana asudam bhavamashritaha. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Asudam bhavam refers to not accepting the existence of God or the transcendental instructions of the personality of Godhead. The Bhagavad Gita clearly consists of transcendental instructions imparted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But asuras, instead of accepting these instructions directly, make commentaries according to their own whimsical ways and mislead everyone, without profit even for themselves. One should therefore be very careful of demoniac, godless persons. According to the words of Lord Krishna, even if a godless demon is very well educated, he must be considered a mudha, naradama, and maya pradita jnana, a fool, the lowest among men, and one whose knowledge has been stolen by maya, illusion. Om jnana timarandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshur unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Śrīla Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. So a lot's going on here. They've determined to churn the ocean. A little problem there. They didn't have a support for the churning rod, which was Mount Mandara, very heavy. And apparently it just didn't sink down to the bottom of the ocean. I'm not sure why, as soon as they put it in there. But anyway, it was a problem, and so Kurma came underneath to be the support. So that's one incarnation. And Ajita, we heard about Ajita. He's the Manvantara avatar. Manvantara avatar are avatars who are associated with each Manu, and who help them in their ruling the universe for their Manvantara, which is the period. So you may recall that this whole section started with a list of Manus and their Manvantara avatars, and Ajita was there. Or it may appear in a different list, but all of them are listed in this 8th canto. So this is very revealing, this whole adventure of churning the ocean of milk and getting not only the nectar, but first comes the poison. Now we can take this as an analogy of the prosecution of Krishna consciousness. And yes, there's an inducement to taste the nectar, and we may even taste a little nectar just walking in the door. The kirtan, the prasadam, nice devotees, But then you have to go through austerity, things that, in order to really make advancement, be willing to follow the 4 regular principles, which is sometimes a big hurdle for people, and accept things that you might not want to accept, like getting up really early in the morning and taking a cool shower. Is that a cool shower, at least? So that's inevitable, because Krishna is we have to reform our activities so that we're not in the thrall of all the bad habits that we may develop in this especially in this age. So so Srila Prabhupada presented that, and the process of surrender, anukulena sankalpa pratikulya sabharjanam rakshasatiti vishwaso goptadvevaranang tata atmanikchepakarpani sharanagati. So it's worth reviewing these, because these are like the doorway in which you can actually enter the house of Bhakti. So it's interesting, the first one is to accept things favorable, you see. Now look at this in contrast to the Ashtanga yoga system. Right, you have those 8, famously yama, niyama, asana, pratyahara, pranayama, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So yama means don'ts. Those are the don'ts. So you begin with having to perform pretty severe austerities. You have to be alone. Krishna gives you have to go off to a secluded place and practice sitting, and that's also in the list, in the pranayama. But in Krishna consciousness, the first thing is the positive things. In other words, even if you're unclean, that's to put it, as a summary, your habits are more or less Kali Yuga habits, and you're still eating meat, you crazily take intoxication, all 4 of them you may be performing. Still, you're invited into the kirtan. Come, chant. There's no hard and fast rules. What is it? Not the Chaitya Darbana, but the second one. Nam namakari bahudani sarva shaktis tatrapitani yamitak smadane nakala. So, O Krishna, has many different names, nam namakari, unlimited names, and you've invested your potencies in all of them. This is a very important understanding, that he's vested his potencies, and indeed he's non-different from his name. So when you chant with attention and hearing, even if it's not somewhat attentive, somehow if you're chanting or hearing the name, you're associating with Krishna, and the purification process begins. But what he says there very importantly is that Smadane Nakala, there is no restricted time, and the inference is time, place, or candidate for chanting the holy names. Anyone, anytime, anywhere can chant. This is whole pastime with, a little boy who encouraged Lord Chaitanya that even in the restrooms, so to speak, you can chant Hare Krishna. And then he called him Guru. That he became Guru. I forget the name. So, but not any other mantra. You can't go in there chanting the Vedas or even the Bhagavad Gita. Just the holy name, because that's so purifying. It's auspicious anywhere. That's an important point. So that's the side point. So what's happening here is that under the instruction of the Lord, the demigods and the demons declared a truce. They both saw that it was favorable for them to have a truce, because only in that way could they get the nectar, and each of them could get a portion. So that's the idea. And and over the verses that came before in the classes, I realized that, of course, this is before Vamanadeva appears. He's going to appear later in the canto. So Bali has conquered the universe, right? And he's the leader of the demons, and he's got to agree to this truce, and that's implied that he hasn't agreed. And then ultimately, if you know the pastime, the demons will be cheated by Krishna in the form of Mohini Murti. They can become completely bewildered. She's so beautiful, and she's handing out the nectar, but she's not giving them. She's going to the other side. One demon gets nectar. The Rahu, he sneaks in amongst the demigods, and he's standing, and he gets a few drops of nectar. Then they realize he's a demon, but he's already got it, so they cut his head off. But his head is immortal now because it's going to take the nectar. So that's the Rahu planet. And sometimes he causes mischief as a lunar eclipse or something like that. So, so who gets cheated? Bali also gets cheated. So he's actually a great devotee, Bali. He's one of the 12 Mahajans. He's a descendant of Prahlad. But in in his demon guise, or his demon identity, he gets cheated from the nectar, and then he's going to get cheated again from Vamanadeva, right? But it's interesting. He was warned by Shukracharya that he'll be cheated, but he basically said he didn't care, and that's why he's a Mahajan. He's the exemplar for Atmanivedanam. So anyway, that's the backstory going on here. So, and also this whole thing of being at the head of the Vasuki, I think that backfires on the demons, isn't it? There's some fire coming out, and they get all blackened and everything. So in every step, the demons are making the wrong turn, you know. But there's also so much lesson here. Lord Śiva, how merciful he is. This poison is apparently really super poisonous. It's interesting that by the efforts of the modern Kali Yuga, so-called civilization, the ocean is becoming poisoned. There's a huge island of garbage. I think it's bigger than Hawaii now, near Hawaii, that just has gathered, you know, and all this plastic going into the ocean, ending up in the fish and the food people eating. So anyway, the ocean is very important, and it's going to take a long time to get it purified. So let's see. So Prabhupada, he berates the so-called scientists here. Svadhyaya Shruta Sampanna. In other words, they're studying their shrutis, so to speak, and coming up with this idea that milk is dangerous and that beef obtained by the killing of cows is very nutritious. So this is the danger. Prabhupada, so many times, a large part of his preaching was combating material science. Because they're, in the modern age, they're, in most cases anyway, thought to be the sources of real knowledge that can help us to live in this world and prosper and so forth. But the ascending process of knowledge, which is the scientific method, observation, and then getting a theory, and then testing it and so forth, and then coming out, this is the way things are. This is the conclusion, how the world is working, you know. But the perfect example of how that doesn't work is mentioned actually in the Bhagavad Gita. Asatyam apadishtam te jagadahu anishwaram apadaspadasambutam kimanyat kama hoitikam. This is kind of the summary of this idea that just matter coming together makes life, you know. And the first thing is they say, asatyam, there's no absolute truth. There's nothing out there to define. We're just going to discover as much as we can. We understand that there's always going to be more to figure out. Apatishtam te, there's no ultimate rest or foundation or origin of everything. And then they declare Jagadadhura and Ishwaram. Now this is a very important point. That it's a kind of a linguistic thing also. And that is the difference between agnostic and atheist. Agnosticism and atheism. And sometimes Prabhupada seems to conflate the two. Because they'll say, the agnostics, and he seems to be talking about atheists. And I think part of that is because in Sanskrit, there's a word, it's in the Bhagavad Gita also, I think, Nastika, which really means doesn't exist, right? Meaning God doesn't exist. But it's come to be the word describing the atheist, Nastika. But you can see how close it is to agnostic. You see? Agnostic, Nastika. Must be the same word. But it's not. Agnostic literally means don't know. Gnostic is the word derived from jnana, I believe. Think about it. Jnana, and gnostic. So the Gnostics, they were in Middle Ages. They were apparently those who knew not just material knowledge, but also some mystical knowledge. I don't know exactly where they fit into the religious hierarchy, but agnostic means that they don't know. And they say that they themselves say, well, we don't know if God exists, you see. But real Orthodox agnostic says, and no one can know. They declare no one can know, which puts them on the side of atheists. So in any case, that's the agnosticism, and even more importantly, atheism, has become very prominent because the scientific method has become ascendant as a means of knowing things. Not, this descending knowledge from realized souls, and so forth. That's poo-pooed by the atheists. So what do we have? We have what you see, I mean, I was thinking, this churning of the ocean. Somehow, when I was reading this and preparing, I was thinking about, how global warming is manifesting often through the ocean, because the oceans actually absorb most of the heat that's getting through. Instead of being reflected out, it's being held in by the carbon dioxide and the methane and things. And so a lot of that, vast majority, is absorbed by the ocean. But that causes havoc. I was in I was in Miami for 6 years. And we had occasional, luckily while I was there, a major hurricane didn't strike Miami. But they came in, hit north, and it came to the south. And they caused a certain amount of damage. But the hurricanes have become much more powerful. These two hurricanes that hit this last season in north and then mid-Florida, and then also went up to North Carolina, caused an extraordinary amount of danger. And it's all because the oceans are getting warmer. They have much more heat in them. And that's the engine that causes these hurricanes to get very powerful. So, this is a perfect example of how the lower self is controlling the higher self. Meaning that they have these meetings, everyone knows that climate change is coming, so they call these international meetings, and then the different heads of government or representatives, they take a vow or they make an agreement, yes, we're going to kind of hold it down below 1.5 degrees centigrade above what it was during the industrial age. If we go above that, we're finished. Well, guess what? They're going above it. Nobody, even though they make the agreement, it's just a piece of paper, because you have to change the whole way in which you're dealing with transportation and all these entities. It has to be, but it means it costs something, and everyone is thinking, well, if we do it and they don't do it, then they'll get an advantage in us, so we won't do it. Isn't it? So it's like the whole earth is. And then the Amazon forest, the Amazon forest. I mean, the Amazon forest is so large, and it, in its heyday, was absorbing huge amounts of carbon dioxide. Because that plants, they breathe by getting the carbon, and they give off oxygen. Now, because they've been clearing it, why? To clear it off, so in Brazil especially, so they could cultivate it for cow slaughter. So it's become so discombobulated that it's absorbing, giving off all carbon dioxide instead of absorbing it, and it's causing havoc. That and everything. So that's a perfect example of how scientific knowledge alone will not work, will not help us, because it's in the service of what? There's a huge weapons industry also. Prabhupada would always give the example. Yes, this is dushkriti. You know, Krishna says, Namam dushkriti no mudha papadyante naradama maya parigyana asunam bhavamashita. So these four types don't surrender to me. Namam dushkriti no mudha, the fools. You know, this is the foolish people. Namam dushkriti no mudha papadyante, not papadyante, don't surrender to me. Papadyante naradama, lowest among men, those are just low class. And then Maya Pradita Jnana, Maya Pradita Jnana, those whose knowledge has been stolen by illusion, by Maya, and then the out and out demons, Asura and Bhavamashita. But the first line, Namam Dushkritino. Now the word Dushkritino means not that they're stupid, they can be very intelligent. That's where the kriti comes in. They're qualified, but it's dush. They use it for bad things, and that's the building of the atom bomb. So much intelligence, scientific knowledge, you know, had to be to be marshaled for that first atom bomb. Oppenheimer and all these other guys, you know, E equals mc squared. You know, I learned that in grade school. Well, that's pretty amazing. You know, and my brother taught me that the speed of light is 186,000 miles a second, and then you square that. And then that's the energy that comes out from the matter that's turned into energy. Whoa! And that's exactly the power of the bomb. You get a little bit of uranium, you know, and you work it out so it implodes, gets so dense that it explodes. That's the first bomb. And it may weigh a couple of pounds, but when you multiply it by the speed of light squared, blows up all Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And now they're much 1,000 times bigger. So that's. They don't surrender to Krishna. They don't surrender to Krishna. Because all of those things are built on exaggerated false ego. Even the Naradamas, you know, they have their gangs and everything, and they try to, you know, lord it over. It's all based on tremendous pride and all the qualities listed in the 16th chapter. They manifest all or most of them. So this is the situation in the Kali Yuga. But this is earlier. But still, we find that you know, there's all these demons, and the Krishna has a plan for using them, you know, for the benefit of everyone, so everyone will get the nectar, and you know, like that. And so many things come out. You know, Lakshmi is going to be manifest. The moon is going to come out. Airavata comes out after the poison, and finally, Dhanvantari comes with the jars of nectar. You know. So it's going to be very, it's a wonderful pastime. Let's see. So Prabhupada says, you know, he deals with this dushkriti. This comes up in the purport here. If one is actually educated in Vedic knowledge, is famous for performing prescribed activities, and has been born in a great aristocratic family, why should he be called a demon? The answer is that one may be highly educated, may have been born and so forth, but if he's godless, if he does not listen to the instructions of God, then he is a demon. And actually, you can do a lot more harm if you have all that scientific knowledge, or you're known as a, you know, very intelligent person. Then you can lead people. You can speak very well, you know, even though it's a bunch of lies. But it's you know, people get bewildered. So that's why whatever qualities if you have. You have to decide, you know, this is the key element, the moral quality. Use it in the service of God, or use it in the service of mammon, service of the demoniac goals. So that's really what determines it. And that's, you know, a central part of Lord Chaitanya's movement. It's open to everybody, is Kali Yuga, because they're so unqualified. So they need a process that is easy, and that is attractive, and that is very purifying, and will take them. And so this chanting of the holy name, especially Hare Krishna mantra, is that process. It's the process of the age. And that's why we're sitting here. So, but still, there are these rules and regulations if you really want to advance, not just to get rid of your karma, you know. I mean, that's good, but that's not going to take you back to Godhead. You know, you need to, if you still have material desires. And so, therefore, there's a whole path that is very advanced as well, you know, if you're really serious and fortunate. But the wonderful part about it, and I always bring this up in my little classes in the evening, is that even, what is that? Swalpamapasya dharmasya trayate mahato bayat. That, yeah, how does it start? Nehabhikrimanashasti pratyavaya. So there's no loss or diminution in this process, which is unique. Any material process you engage in, there's total loss and diminution down to zero. And that's why, the injunction is to live as simply as possible. Because all these other, if you accumulate things and attachments, then that's going to bring you back. Yes, you'll have credits in devotional service. But if you're really serious, you try to live as simply as possible. And we saw so many wonderful examples in the history, starting with the 6 Goswamis. Of course, Lord Chaitanya also gave up family life. He took sannyas as an example. But the 6 Goswamis were just amazing, that song. I love the 4th verse is my favorite one. Chaktva turna mashesha mandala patishening sada tuchavat. Chaktva, they gave it up. Chaktva means literally to give it up, totally. Turnam, immediately. It's not that, okay, we'll do it in stages, let's not be, no stages. The stages, Rupa Goswami loaded the boat with all of the gold he had. Worth in today's about $10 billion, and then he gave it away to the Vaishnavas and Brahmins, and he gave some good portion to his relatives because they expect something, and then the rest he kept as an emergency, which turned out to be essential to get his brother out of jail. And even the way in which Sanatana Goswami, his trip, from the jail to Lord Chaitanya in Benares is also told about. So he gets out of the jail and he's walking, and somehow he meets one of his relatives, I think a brother-in-law or something. So what happened? He said, I took sannyas. He says, well, at least take a decent charter here. Take it, I have this extra charter, you can take it. So he accepted that, So he's also got an aide with him. I think he was still with Ishan. And Ishan, being a very responsible servant, he wanted to, to take a little Lakshmi in case something happened, So he had 8 pieces of gold. They didn't tell Sanatana Goswami about. So they're going. He's got this nice shawl on, and they reach it. All we know about it is that it's a hilly tract of land. It's difficult to navigate, and he needs help getting across. So there happens to be an inn or, a motel there. And I guess maybe this was a tradition. The innkeeper had an astrologer with him in case, And he said, they have 8 pieces of gold with them, So he was ready to kill him. And Sanatana Goswami asked him, please help us to get across this hilly tract of land. We don't, it's a difficult, way to go. So the innkeeper was willing to do that, but how did he find out? Anyway, there was the innkeeper saw that he was sincere, and he said, "Well, my astrologer, told me that you have some gold with you. That's why I was going to kill you. But I see that you're a saintly person." So then Sanatana, after the innkeeper, kind of went to do something, he looked at Ishan. Ishan, do you have something with you? Yes, I have 4 pieces of gold. So he said, take it, whatever you have, and go back home. I don't need you. So that was he still had the shawl, this charter, fancy charter. So he was able to get across. I don't know if Ishan went with him to the end of that, I forget. But anyway, he gets across and he goes to Benares and he's there. He appears with Lord Chaitanya, By that time he'd grown a beard, he wasn't shaving. So he comes and he heard that this wonderful sannyasi is living here. So he went and sat on the outside of the little place he was staying. And Lord Chaitanya sensed that, a pilgrim was there. So he told Govinda to go and see if there's a devotee outside. So he came out and he saw this Muslim sitting there with a big beard, and a nice shawl. So no, there's no devotee out there. So is there anyone out there? Yeah, there seems to be some Muslim mendicant or something like that. So he said, ask him in. So he asked him in, and Lord Chaitanya gives him a big hug, and everyone said, what is this? So So then there was, this wonderful, and then, but then Sanatana Goswami saw him. First he said, go and ask my aide to make him gentle, mean to shave his beard, right? So that was the first thing. But then Lord Chaitanya also was looking at his shawl at the charter, and Sanatana knew that. So he went down to the river, and he saw some, poor Babaji lying there, and he had his charter out to dry. It was a very simple, thing. So he offered to exchange his fancy charter, And first the Babaji said, "You look like a very respectable gentleman. Why are you, teasing me this way? There's no way you would give me a nice shawl." "Yes, I'm serious. You should take it." He said, "Oh, really? Okay." So the Babaji got this. So then he came back to Lord Chaitanya. He had his simple, maybe it's patched up, whatever. And Lord Chaitanya was very pleased. "Oh, that was your last attachment, So this is the standard. And then when he gets to Vrindavan, and he and Rupa, they set the standard of, no, you don't have any place to live. You don't even have your own tree. You can live under the tree, but it's one tree after another. And they hardly ate, they hardly slept. They minimized, what is that? Nidra hara vahara vidito. They conquered over sleep and eating and recreation, which means sex. And none of that. They completely conquered over that. And then that Chakvaturnam verse says, okay, they were Chakvat Ashesha Mandalapati Shraining Sadat Tuchavat. All of this they saw after meeting Lord Chaitanya, that all of this pomp and circumstance and position and money was just insignificant. It's useless. Tuchavat. So what do? Budvat Dina Ganesha Kau. In order to help the dinas, the lowest among mankind, us, Ganesha Kau, Karunaya, out of their mercy, they took on the coping, and the rejected clothes, and it's described in more detail in other verses, that they hardly ate anything. But what was their state of mind? They gave up they became as austere as possible, from, the right and left hand of the king, the minister, finance minister, the prime minister. They had everything in their hand. Gave it all up as insignificant. And they were living as austerely as possible, but they were the most happy people in the world. Gopi Bhavara Samratabdal Hali Kalola Magnomahi. This is another ocean. It's not an ocean of poison, no. It's an ocean of nectar. And relishing the different varieties of the gopis' love for Krishna. That's where their mentality was at. And they hardly needed to sleep. They didn't want to even, waste time sleeping. And of course, Rupa especially was writing. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Vidagdha Madhava, and all of the other poems that comprise the Stavamala, and treasures for his cohorts and for all of us. They're giving for all of us. So this is really the talk about an ocean. This is an ocean of Gopi Bhavara Sam of rasa is available if we follow the process to the end. And but here, this is going to be a very fascinating pastime, and Śiva plays a prominent role. Of course, he saved everybody with the poison, but then he gets attracted to Mohini Murti, and he's a little embarrassed about what happens. And just to show how attractive Krishna is in every aspect, you can imagine all attractive Krishna then takes the position of a woman, how attractive that would be. So Śiva has that adventure, but and the demons get cheated, and rightly so, is it? Okay. Any questions or comments on these little?
I have a question, or actually a comment and a question and an appreciation.
All right, I'll take the appreciation first.
Really? Okay, I was going to finish with that. The appreciation is, you hardly need to prepare for these classes, but you do prepare, and those of us who are still working, I just turned 64 this year. My son's in college, so at some point I'll be liberated from this. But in the meantime, I'm a cabinet designer at Lowe's, so I'm sitting there and I can reflect now because of the morning program. Not only, Dayam Stuvam, Jasyas Trisanjam, but all these points that you make, they stay in my mind. So anyway, just a very sincere appreciation. It's just
I'm glad.
Really important.
Thank you, Maitreya. That's encouraging.
Yeah. And one point about the difference between the Maya Prita Jnana and the atheists. There's the gnosis is a Greek word which means knowledge, obviously derived from Sanskrit. And just like Sanskrit, when you put an A in front of it, agnosis or agnostic, it means no knowledge.
Yeah.
But that is a tad more pious than putting an A in front of theistic, which means no God. You're rejecting God. There's even a verse in the Bible, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God.
Yeah, yeah.
So the atheists are the real rascals. And the scientific method, when used by pious persons, my family was wealthy. Jonas Salk was a friend of the family. And one time I asked him, you could have become a multi-billionaire if you had just taken some profit from your polio vaccine.
Yeah.
And he just said with surprise on his face, it's not, I didn't grow up in a vacuum. I owe a debt to everybody. It's not mine. How can I dare claim it? So you have scientists who are not demons, who have one mentality. And of course, we know the other side, the scientists who don't want to help anybody. They develop everything just for their personal profit. And Krishna mentions them in the Gita, which is very valuable to be able to make that distinction.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a kind of a response to that kind of amplifies what you're saying, and that is, Sariputta. I heard a story about how he joined, because he was like a top flight scientist, that mathematician, as I'm sure you know. And I remember when he appeared in the Brooklyn Temple, I was there. And all we knew was that he was good. He was good with numbers, and so they gave him a service to do. I don't think he'd moved in yet, but he was visiting to help out in the office where they're counting the daily revenues from the incense business or whatever. They couldn't figure out how to engage him really. So. But later, much later on, I heard how he became interested in Krishna consciousness. And apparently, at one point, he was living upstate. I think he was going to the university up there, maybe University of Rochester or something. And there was a flood. Sometimes it happens. And so he pitched in with getting the sandbags and everything and doing all that, And then sometime later, he was browsing in a bookstore, and he saw the Bhagavad Gita. I think Bhagavad Gita as it is. And he got intrigued. He got the book. Maybe he bought the book. I think he bought it, and he read it. And that didn't happen. And he was reading it and understanding, and the experience. What I heard is that the experience of him helping out, just doing this good work for people in general, had somehow made him more receptive to the message of the Bhagavad Gita, which is so much about Krishna's doing. And then he came down to Brooklyn, visited, in order to check things out, and eventually joined. And what I'm getting at is that part of the ethos in the 60s, there were like two main groups of young people. There was, of course, the famous hippies, and it's not that they're mutually exclusive, but the hippies are, emphasizing their own rebellion and, of course, the drug and exploring the different hallucinations and like that. But then there was a large cohort, which I belonged to. I wasn't a hippie by any means, although I was the same age, of anti-war, and of course there was also the civil rights movement going on, and so I participated in some of the marches of that, and and so forth. And my parents, they'd been organizers during the labor movement in the 30s and 40s, and so we inherited that. That was part of our ethos as growing up, is to do good for others and have this social conscience and morality. And I think that that's one of the reasons why Prabhupada was able to plant the seed so successfully, because it's not mutually exclusive. A lot of the people who became hippies, they took some drugs. I didn't take any hallucination, but I was smoking marijuana. They also belonged to the other group. There was a lot of cross-pollination, and so that sense, Prabhupada was such an example of someone who was sacrificing really everything for the good of humanity. And if you really understood what he was giving was even greater than just trying to stop the war or anything like that. But it was still in the same general thing of trying to help others and sacrificing for others. That is a central part of our philosophy. How and you see, I was just talking about the six Goswamis, and of course Srila Prabhupada, a great example. The sacrifice, and what is tomorrow, Easter. I mean, Prabhupada would sometimes cite this thing of accepting the being killed on the cross, because he was really a genuine acharya, and is trying to spread Krishna consciousness as it was possible at that time. So anyway, and that's one of the things that attracted me about Krishna consciousness, is the idea that it's in one sense it's a welfare organization, but at the same time you're also giving yourself the best benefit and go back to Godhead. So both sides are there, and that was both sides of Lord Chaitanya. Krishna came down in order to experience, that verse, experience himself from Radharani's point of view, her love and all that. That was the external reason, but that was the internal reason. But the external reason was to spread the Sankirtan movement for the benefit of everyone.
Wonderful point. As we know, chant favors the prepared mind. So we distribute enough books, then some pious people will get them, and they'll see, oh, here's a chance I can really do some good.
Yes. Okay, how about Vijay? Vijay?
Yes, Dravida Prabhu, I have a question.
I'm sure you do. Go for it.
Do you mind reading again the last sentence of the purport?
Okay, the last sentence of the purport. According to the words of Lord Krishna, that one?
Yes.
According to the words of Lord Krishna, even if a godless demon is very well educated, he must be considered a Mudha, Naradama, and Maya Parita Jnana.
Yes, that is the quote. Thank you very much. You're most kind, and Abhat Pranams. Prabhu, based on this quote, my question would be, how do you explain that a godless demon may be very well educated? That is my question.
That seems very simple. I mean, very well educated, of course. Well educated means here by material standards. PhD, can have be heading up a research thing, whatever, And so that's very possible, because what is it that makes a demon a demon? It's those qualities in the 16th chapter. And I always love this mantra that Krishna gives us in there, Ishvaroham hambogi siddhoham balabansukhi. I am the master. I am perfect, powerful, and happy, I am the enjoyer. So that mentality can definitely be there in someone who is very well educated in like a Western education. Because education, of course, is supposed to include moral education, training in that way. But in the West, it doesn't necessarily include that. If you don't take those kind of courses in your college, you can just take. So being very well educated, and Prabhupada gives the example. Apparently Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, they were both well educated. They knew especially the Karmakanda section, the right mantras, in order to go to heaven. So that kind of education, which of course Prabhupada condemns as, and it's a, what did he call them? Slaughterhouses, the universities. It was very, because you spend, first of all, you spend so much money, and then, of course you have to go into debt. That's another way you get slaughtered. But you get misguided. The whole point is you're learning all of this technical science or whatever it may be, or some literature, but it's not giving you any clue about the essence of who you are, what the goal of life is, how to reach it, all of that. So therefore, it's a miseducation. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur has this song. I don't know the song, but he makes the same point, that this so-called education just makes you more deep in darkness, because you think you know something. Therefore, I don't have to read that old book. That's just that's just witchcraft. I'm going to read my, this. But what are you doing with that knowledge? That's the whole point. You're misusing it. So that's the idea. A demon can be very well educated, not in the point of knowing the Bhagavad Gita and knowing these things, but knowing Western or material knowledge. There's a whole bunch of things you can learn like that. I remember I was this was many years ago. I was a devotee, but somehow I had found my way into a library. I was waiting for another devotee. This is a university library. And I was looking, I said, well, all right, let me look at what the books are, And there was a book on, this different kind of insects, or, this place over here, and the different varieties of stones. And it was all just, someone had dedicated their life to studying the insects of this part of the world. And that was their PhD. And they wrote the book, and it became printed as a, right? Isn't it crazy? So that was really Prabhupada's main thrust, is that to give knowledge, to give real knowledge that's beneficial for the soul, that has meaning. Otherwise, this kind of knowledge is just a symptom of Kali Yuga. It becomes very prominent and controlling, and the worst demons, they employ the experts in technology in order to control, and it's all in the service of demonic motives. That's the point. So very well educated in what? What does your education consist of? And so Prabhupada, he wanted us, he started the Bhakti Shastri course. Okay, you can get your degree in Bhakti Shastri, and then you get Bhakti Vedanta, like that. In his books. He was very disappointed when he learned that the devotees were really distributing a lot of his books, but because of that, they didn't have time enough to read his books. So I heard in the morning walk, he said, then what's the use? Because, if the devotees don't read them. So he established these classes, of course, and as well as the courses. And then we can be very well educated. Now, someone like Sariputta and the other members of the BI who did have degrees, and Swarup Damodar was the pioneer, who could use that in the service of God consciousness. Prabhupada was very happy, to see that he was able to attract some those who had PhDs or they were highly educated, but still they were devotees, and they understood the primacy of transcendental knowledge and the Shastric knowledge. That's the best I can do, Prabhu.
Yes, Dravida Prabhu, if I may, I liked it when you mentioned that the first aspect of a university to be not different from a slaughterhouse is that they put us in debt.
Yeah. That wasn't there when I was coming up, but now it's like it's a total part of the total perversion. It's just a business. All right, people want to be so okay, we'll educate them, but they can't afford it, so we'll put them into debt, and then we'll get all the interest, for the rest of their life. It's what we call, I think, what's that word? Demonic. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.